You're only successful because Marcus died and left you a paycheck. Without that, you're just a cold, bitter clerk. That's what my younger brother said to me at my parents' dinner table on a Sunday in front of my 9-year-old daughter. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my napkin across the table or knock over the gravy boat. I looked at Nolan, then I looked at my mother, who was covering her mouth, not in horror, but to hide the fact that she was laughing. Then I looked at Maya. Her lower lip was trembling. Her fork was frozen halfway to her mouth, a piece of roast beef still on the end of it, and her eyes, those wide brown eyes that look exactly like her father's, were filling with tears she was trying very hard not to let fall. I folded my napkin, I set it beside my plate, and I kept my voice steady. I understand that's how you see it, Nolan. I hope your new venture provides the clarity you're clearly lacking. If you've ever had a family member treat your success like it was a gift they're entitled to, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me back up, because that Sunday dinner didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the last domino in a line that had been falling for 6 years. My name is Vivian Drake. I'm 37 years old. I'm a widow. My husband Marcus died in a car accident 4 years ago, and he left behind 2 things that mattered: our daughter Maya and a life insurance trust that I have never touched for anything other than her future. That trust is locked. It's managed by a fiduciary. I don't use it for groceries, I don't use it for vacations, and I certainly don't use it to fund my brother's lifestyle, no matter how many times my family has implied otherwise. What I do have, what I built with my own 2 hands, is Drake & Associates. It's a boutique accounting firm in Portland, Maine. I started it 12 years ago with a folding table, a used laptop, and my CPA license. No investors, no family money, no shortcuts. I did tax prep for small businesses during the day and studied for my advisory certifications at night. I made $17,000 my first year. I didn't take a vacation for 4 years. Today, Drake & Associates manages tax preparation and financial advisory services for 53 small business clients. My firm is valued, conservatively, at just over $600,000. My home is worth $650,000. Between the firm, the house, the trust for Maya, and my personal savings, my net worth sits at approximately $1.4 million. I didn't inherit that. I built it. One tax return at a time. But according to my family, none of that matters. According to my mother, Barbara, I'm just lucky. According to my father, George, he doesn't say much of anything at all. And according to my brother, Nolan, who is 31 years old and has never held a job for longer than 14 months, I owe him. Let me explain what owing Nolan has looked like over the past 6 years. 6 years ago, Nolan's 3rd startup failed. I don't remember what it was supposed to be. Something with an app. Something with subscriptions. It doesn't matter because it collapsed in 8 months, just like the 2 before it. He was 25, broke, and living in my parents' basement. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening and said, "Vivian, your brother needs structure. He needs someone to believe in him. You have that little office. Can't you just give him something to do?" I should have said no. I told myself it was just a temporary arrangement. I told myself this was simply what family did. I hired Nolan as an office assistant. I paid him $1,800 a month. For that, he was supposed to work 25 hours a week answering phones, organizing files, and scheduling appointments. In reality, he rarely worked more than 15. He showed up late. He left early. He spent most of his time at the desk scrolling his phone or taking personal calls in the break room, but I kept paying him. $1,800 a month, 12 months a year, for 6 years. That's $85,000 in salary for a man who never once filed a document correctly. That wasn't all. When Nolan was 26, my mother called again. His private student loans were in default. The collection calls were embarrassing her. Could I help? I paid off $45,000 in student loan debt. I wrote a check and handed it directly to the lender. Nolan didn't even come to the meeting. My mother picked up the confirmation letter and mailed it to him. When Nolan was 28, he needed a car. His old one had been repossessed because he'd missed 4 consecutive payments on it. Payments I had not been told about. Payments he had apparently been telling my parents he was making. My mother called. Could I help? I put $12,500 down on a 2021 sedan. The title is in his name. He has never made a single payment toward reimbursement. $45,000 for the loans, $12,500 for the car, $85,000 in salary. That's $142,500 over 6 years. I never asked for a thank you. I never brought it up at dinner. I never held it over his head. I pushed it down. I told myself he was my brother. I told myself that Marcus would have wanted me to help family. I told myself silence was the way to keep the peace. And every single time I swallowed another request, my mother smiled and said, "See, that wasn't so hard, was it?" 2 years ago, the requests changed. They stopped being about helping Nolan get on his feet. They became about what my mother believed Nolan deserved. It started at Thanksgiving. Barbara pulled me aside in the kitchen while I was carving the turkey. She had that look, the one where she tilts her head and smiles like she's about to explain something simple to a child. "Vivian, I've been thinking. Nolan has been at your office for 4 years now. He knows the clients. He knows the systems. Don't you think it's time you made him a partner? 50-50. It would be fair." I set the carving knife down. I looked at her. "Mom, Nolan doesn't have a CPA license. He can't sign returns. He can't represent clients before the IRS. He can't provide advisory services. He answers phones." Barbara waved her hand like I just told her the weather. "Details. He could learn. You could teach him. The point is, he's family, and family shares." I stayed quiet. There was nothing to add, but she didn't stop. Over the next 2 years, the partnership demand came up at every gathering. Christmas dinner, Easter brunch, Maya's birthday party, which was a particularly cruel choice of venue. Every time, the same pitch delivered with the same tilted head and the same condescending smile. Every time, I said no. And every time, Barbara's smile got a little thinner. "You are always the difficult one, Vivian. Your brother has vision. You just have spreadsheets." George sat at the end of the table during every one of these conversations. He never intervened. He never said, "Barbara, that's enough." He never told Nolan to be grateful. He cleared his throat once, maybe twice, and went back to his pot roast. His silence wasn't neutral. It was permission. The only time my father spoke to me directly in the past 2 years about anything other than the weather was when he called me on a Wednesday afternoon and asked if I could help with the property tax bill on their house. The house worth $310,000. The house they own outright. I paid the bill. He said, "Thanks, Viv," and hung up. That brings us to the Sunday dinner. It was the second week of October. My mother had made roast beef. The table was set with the good china, the kind she only uses when she wants something to feel important. Candles were lit, rolls in a basket with a cloth napkin over the top. Maya sat next to me, her hair in 2 braids, wearing the cardigan Marcus had bought her the Christmas before he died. She'd outgrown it, but she refused to stop wearing it. The sleeves barely reached her wrists. Nolan arrived 20 minutes late. He was wearing a new blazer. He had a leather portfolio under his arm, which was unusual because I had never once seen Nolan carry anything that wasn't his phone. He kissed Barbara on the cheek. He shook George's hand. He didn't acknowledge Maya. He never does. We sat down. Barbara served the roast. George said a short grace. For 10 minutes, it almost felt like a normal family dinner. Then Nolan set down his fork, opened the leather portfolio, and pulled out a single sheet of printed paper. "I have an announcement," he said. Barbara was already beaming. She knew. I could see it in the way she straightened in her chair, the way her hands clasped together under her chin. "I'm starting my own firm," Nolan said. "Miller Wealth Management. I've secured office space downtown. I signed the lease last week." I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my face still. I didn't react. I just listened. "And I want everyone to know," he continued, looking directly at me, "that I didn't need anyone's permission to do this. I've spent 6 years learning everything there is to know about this business from the inside. I know every client, I know every account, and frankly, I know how to do it better." Barbara clapped. Actually clapped. Like he just graduated from medical school. George nodded once and reached for a roll. I stayed silent, letting him continue. "I've already reached out to several of your clients, Vivian. They deserve options. They deserve someone who actually cares about relationships, not just billable hours." I felt nothing. Not anger. Not pity. Nothing. I set my fork down. I looked at him. You contacted my clients? Our clients, he corrected. I helped build that list. You answered phones, Nolan? Barbara cut in immediately. Vivian, don't start. He's been a part of that office for 6 years. Those relationships belong to the family. I didn't respond. I just listened. I watched Nolan slide the printed sheet toward me. It was a list. Names, phone numbers, email addresses, all 53 of my clients printed in neat columns. He'd taken it from the database. He'd taken all of it. I'm not asking for your blessing, Nolan said. I'm telling you I'm done being your assistant. I'm done watching you sit on a fortune you didn't earn while the rest of us scrape by. That's when he said it. He leaned forward and looked me dead in the eyes. You're only successful because Marcus died and left you a paycheck. Without that, you're just a cold, bitter clerk. The table went silent. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind where everyone has heard the thing that cannot be unsaid and nobody moves. Barbara pressed her lips together. She didn't correct him. She didn't flinch. She turned to Maya. Maya, you shouldn't be so proud of your house. It was bought with blood money that should have been shared with your Uncle Nolan. Maya's fork clattered against the plate. Her lower lip trembled. Her hand found my sleeve under the table, and her small fingers twisted into the fabric until her knuckles went white. She didn't cry. Not yet. She was trying so hard not to cry, and that was worse than if she had. George sat motionless at the head of the table, eyes fixed on his plate, hands folded in his lap. He didn't look up. He didn't speak. I looked at my daughter. I looked at her braids and her too small cardigan, and her father's eyes filling with tears because the people who were supposed to love her had just told her that her home was bought with her daddy's death. Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just a clean, quiet break. I reached over and gently loosened Maya's grip from my sleeve. I held her hand instead. I squeezed it once. Then I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table beside my plate. Thank you for dinner, Mom. I stood. I helped Maya with her chair. I picked up her jacket from the hook by the door. I put it on her shoulders. I zipped it slowly, deliberately, the way I always do, starting from the bottom and pulling up until the zipper clicked at the top. Nolan called after me. That's it? You're just going to walk away? Typical Vivian. No spine, no fight. I didn't turn around. I opened the front door. The October air was sharp and clean. Maya looked up at me as we walked to the car. Her voice was small, cracked right down the middle. Mom, is what Uncle Nolan said true? Are we only okay because Daddy died? I knelt on the cold pavement beside the passenger door. I took both her hands. No, baby. We're okay because I work very hard every single day, and your daddy loved us. Those are two separate things, and neither one belongs to anyone but us. She nodded. She didn't say anything else. She climbed into the car and buckled her seatbelt and stared out the window. I walked around to the driver's side. I sat behind the wheel. I closed the door. The engine started with a low, steady hum. I pulled out of the driveway without looking back. The house, the candles, the good china, the roast beef, all of it fading in the rearview mirror. Maya fell asleep on the drive home. I carried her inside and laid her on her bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin. I tucked the too small cardigan around her shoulders because she'd want it there in the morning. Then I walked to the kitchen. I sat at the island. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the clock above the stove. I sat there for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text Nolan or Barbara or George. I sat in the quiet of my own house, the house I bought with money I earned, in the firm I built with my own name and my own license, and I thought about every dollar. $45,000 for his loans, $12,500 for his car, $85,000 in salary for a job he barely did, $142,500, and he looked at my daughter and told her that her dead father's money was the only reason we had anything. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was sharp. It was clear. I opened my laptop. The screen lit up in the dark kitchen. I logged into the firm's server remotely. I navigated to the access logs. And there it was. October 11th. 2 days before the dinner, Nolan's credentials. A bulk download of the entire client database. Names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, tax ID numbers, service histories, 12 years of data copied in a single session at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night when he thought no one would notice. I stared at the screen. The streetlight cutting through the blinds made a thin white line across the countertop. I was done pretending this was okay. I didn't call Nolan. I didn't call my mother. I didn't draft an angry email or compose a text message full of things I'd been holding back for 6 years. I picked up my phone, scrolled to a name I hadn't needed to use in a long time, and pressed call. Arthur Wright answered on the second ring. It was 2:14 a.m., but Arthur's the kind of attorney who answers when a client calls at 2:14 a.m. because he knows that clients like me don't call at that hour unless something is real. Arthur, it's Vivian Drake. I need to see you first thing tomorrow. Bring the master file for Drake & Associates. Every service agreement, every engagement letter, every contract addendum from the last 12 years. All of them. He didn't ask why. He said, I'll be at your office at 7:30. I hung up. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark kitchen for another 11 minutes, and then I went to bed. I slept better than I had in years. Arthur arrived at 7:28 a.m., carrying a banker's box and a legal pad. I had coffee waiting. Maya was at school. The office was empty because Nolan, of course, had stopped showing up the week he signed his lease downtown. He hadn't bothered to resign. He just stopped coming. I told Arthur everything. The dinner, the announcement, what Nolan said to Maya, what Barbara said about blood money, the downloaded client database, the printed list Nolan had slid across the table like a trophy. Arthur listened without interrupting. When I finished, he opened the banker's box and pulled out a stack of service agreements, each one tabbed and dated. He fanned them across my desk. Vivian, when you drafted these engagement letters, you did something most small firm owners never think to do. Do you remember what it was? I remembered. I remembered exactly. Personal service contracts, I said. Every agreement is between the client and me individually, tied to my CPA license number. Not to Drake & Associates as a business entity. The firm is the vehicle. I am the service. Arthur nodded. Which means the non-solicitation clauses in every one of these agreements don't protect a company. They protect you. Personally. Any client who terminates with you to follow Nolan would be in breach of their own contract. And Nolan, by contacting them and encouraging that breach, is liable for tortious interference with contractual relations. He set down his pen and looked at me. He didn't steal a business, Vivian. He stole a phone list, and then he used it to commit a tort against you 53 times. I kept my voice steady. What do I need? Proof that he solicited them. If even one client forwards his outreach email to you, we have standing. If more do, we have a pattern. I picked up my phone. I opened my email. I turned the screen toward Arthur. 41 unread messages, all received between 6 a.m. and 7:15 a.m. that morning. 41 of my 53 clients had received Nolan's solicitation email overnight. A mass blast sent at 4:30 a.m. from a brand new Miller Wealth Management email address offering personalized tax and advisory services from someone who knows your account inside and out. 41 of them had forwarded it directly to me. Several had added notes. Sarah Thompson, my client of 10 years, had written, Vivian, I thought you should see this. I'm not going anywhere. Another read, Is this a joke? We signed with you, not him. Another, Just want you to know this went straight to my spam, then straight to you. 41 forwards. 41 clients who chose me, not a name on a door, not a firm. Me. Arthur looked at the screen for a long time. Then he looked at me. I'll have the cease and desist letters drafted by noon, and I'm bringing in a forensic IT specialist to document the unauthorized database download. His name is James Miller, no relation to your family. He'll pull the server logs, timestamp everything, and prepare an affidavit. I nodded. Do it. Arthur paused at the door. Vivian, one more thing. That lease Nolan signed downtown, do you know who co-signed it? I did know. My mother had mentioned it at Easter like it was something to celebrate. She'd said it like she was proud, like she and George were finally investing in the right child. My parents, I said. Both of them. They co-signed the lease and took out a $90,000 loan to cover his first year of operations. They used their house as collateral. Arthur wrote something on his legal pad. He didn't comment. He didn't need to. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I sat at my desk. I pulled up the server access logs again. I printed them. I printed the 41 forwarded emails. I printed Nolan's employment records, his attendance history, every pay stub I'd ever issued him. I printed the canceled check for $45,000 made out to his student loan servicer. I printed the receipt for the $12,500 down payment on his sedan. I organized everything into a single file, tabbed and dated. 12 years of meticulous records, 6 years of financial support, 1 night of data theft, 41 witnesses. The file was 4 inches thick. By Tuesday afternoon, 48 hours after the dinner, Arthur had delivered the cease and desist letters, 1 to Nolan personally, 1 to Miller Wealth Management as a business entity. Each letter cited the specific non-solicitation language from the service agreements, referenced my CPA license number, identified the unauthorized database access by date and time, and demanded immediate cessation of all client contact under penalty of civil action for tortious interference. James Miller, the forensic IT specialist, had the server logs imaged and preserved by 2 o'clock. The affidavit was signed by 3. I didn't call Nolan to warn him. I didn't give him a chance to explain or apologize or spin another story. The cease and desist went out by certified mail and by email simultaneously at 3:17 p.m. At 3:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Nolan's name on the screen. I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. I put it on speaker. I set the phone on my desk. What did you do? His voice was high, tight, stripped of every ounce of the confidence he'd had at the dinner table. I just got served with a cease and desist. From your lawyer. You're threatening to sue me? I kept my voice even, calm, like I was reading a tax summary to a client. I'm not threatening anything, Nolan. I'm enforcing the contracts I wrote. Every service agreement my client signed is a personal service contract tied to my CPA license. Not to the firm's address, not to the firm's name. To me. Those non-solicitation clauses protect me individually. When you contacted my clients and encouraged them to breach those agreements, you committed tortious interference. 41 of them forwarded your email to me this morning. 41. Silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing. I didn't build a business, Nolan. I built a reputation. My clients signed with me, not a name on a door. You didn't steal a firm. You stole a list of people who now have legal grounds to sue you. You can't do this. His voice cracked. Those are my clients, too. I spent 6 years in that office. You spent 6 years answering phones for $1,800 a month and working 15 hours a week. You don't have a CPA license. You can't sign returns. You can't represent a client before the IRS. You can't provide advisory services. You have no professional standing and no contractual right to a single name on that list. This is financial murder. You're trying to destroy me. I'm protecting my practice. And for the record, Nolan, you currently have a $90,000 loan secured against Mom and Dad's house, a $15,000 early lease penalty if you can't maintain occupancy, and roughly $10,000 in legal fees you're about to accumulate fighting a case you cannot win. That's $115,000 in exposure, and you don't have a single client. The breathing on the other end got ragged, uneven. Call them back. Tell them I'm allowed to reach out. Tell your lawyer to stop this. No. Vivian, I'm your brother. You looked at my daughter and told her that her father's death was the only reason she has a home. You called the money I earned a paycheck from a dead man. My mother told a 9-year-old girl that she lives in a house built on blood money. And your father, who sat 3 feet away, said nothing. Silence. You're not my brother right now, Nolan. You're a man who stole proprietary data from my server at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night and used it to commit a tort. My attorney and my forensic IT specialist have the logs, the timestamps, and 41 sworn client statements. That's not a family matter anymore. It's a legal one. I heard him start to say something. I pressed end. I set the phone face down on the desk. My phone buzzed 17 more times in the next 2 hours. Nolan, Barbara, Nolan again. A number I didn't recognize that was almost certainly George calling from the landline. Barbara again. Then a string of texts, each one longer and more frantic than the last. I didn't answer. I didn't read them. I turned off the ringer. At 6:15 the next evening, the doorbell rang. Not once, not twice. It rang 5 times in rapid succession, then someone held it down for a full 3 seconds. I looked through the peephole. Barbara. She was standing on my porch in her good coat, the one she wears to church, but her hair wasn't done, and her eyes were red-rimmed, and her lipstick was smudged at the corner of her mouth like she'd wiped her face and forgotten she was wearing it. I didn't open the door. She rang again. Then she knocked. Then she spoke, her voice muffled through the wood. "Vivienne, open this door. We need to talk about this. You're destroying your brother. You're destroying this family. Your father hasn't slept. I haven't slept. You need to call that lawyer and tell him to stop." I stood on my side of the door. My hand rested on the frame. Maya was in her room doing homework. I could hear the soft scratch of her pencil on paper. Barbara's voice shifted. The commanding tone cracked, and underneath it was something rawer. "Vivienne, please. They used the house. The house is collateral. If Nolan can't pay that lease, the bank comes after us. Do you understand what that means? We could lose our home. Your father could lose his home." I stayed quiet. I let her continue. "We backed him because we believed in him. We believed he could do this. We didn't think it would come to this. He's your brother. He made a mistake. People make mistakes." She waited. The porch light cast her shadow long and thin under the door. "He told your daughter something terrible. I know that. I know what I said was wrong. But you can't punish all of us for one bad dinner. You can't take our house over words." I pressed my palm flat against the door. I felt the cold wood against my skin. I thought about $45,000 in student loans, $12,500 for a sedan, $85,000 in salary for a ghost employee, $142,500 I gave freely, without condition, without resentment, for 6 years. I thought about Maya's lower lip trembling. I thought about her hand twisting into my sleeve until her knuckles went white. I thought about her voice in the parking lot, cracked right down the middle, asking me if the only reason she was okay was because her father died. I didn't open the door. Barbara stood on the porch for 14 more minutes. I know because I watched the clock above the stove. She knocked twice more. She called my name 3 more times. Her voice went from pleading to angry and back to pleading. Then she went quiet. I heard her heels on the porch steps. I heard her car door open and close. I heard the engine start. I heard her pull away. The house fell into total silence. I walked to the front door and checked the lock. It was already engaged. I turned the deadbolt anyway. I heard the soft, unmistakable click of the bolt sliding into place. Then I walked to my phone. I picked it up. I went through my contacts slowly, deliberately. I blocked Nolan's number. I blocked Barbara's number. I blocked George's number. I blocked the landline. I removed myself from the family group chat. I deleted 3 unread voicemails without listening to them. I set the phone face down on the counter. Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway, her pencil still in her hand. "Was that Grandma?" "Yes." "Is she coming in?" "No, baby, she's not." Maya looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded, the way 9-year-olds nod when they understand more than you want them to. "Good," she said quietly. She went back to her homework. I stood in my kitchen, in my house, in the silence that belonged to us. The door stayed locked. I went through the next 3 days the same way I go through a quarterly reconciliation. Methodical, thorough, final. I changed the gate code on the office building. I revoked Nolan's server credentials permanently and had James Miller run a full security audit to confirm no residual access points remained. I updated the emergency contact list at Maya's school, removing Barbara and George Miller and replacing them with my neighbor, a woman named Helen Davis who had watched Maya after school a dozen times and never once made her feel like she owed anyone anything for the privilege. I removed Barbara from the shared photo album I'd maintained of Maya's school events. I unsubscribed from the family email chain my mother used to coordinate holidays. I canceled the recurring calendar reminder for the first Sunday of every month that simply read, "Dinner at Mom's." I didn't do any of it in anger. I did it in clarity. Then I closed the file, not the 4-inch legal file on my desk. That one stayed open. I closed the file in my head, the one I'd been carrying for 6 years that was labeled, "Maybe They'll Change." Arthur Wright called me the following Tuesday. His voice had the particular flatness attorneys use when they're delivering facts that carry their own weight. Nolan retained counsel. A solo practitioner named David Foster mostly does contract disputes for small landlords. He sent a response to our cease and desist arguing that the non-solicitation clauses are unenforceable because Nolan was never a signatory to the client agreements. And he's wrong. The clauses protect you as the service provider. Nolan doesn't need to be a party to the contract to be liable for tortious interference. He induced a breach by soliciting clients bound by those terms. I sent back a 12-page memorandum citing 6 cases from the First Circuit, and I haven't heard from Mr. Foster since. Arthur paused. I heard him turn a page. There's more. I received a call from the landlord's attorney yesterday. Nolan missed his first month's rent on the downtown office. $4,200, due on the 1st, unpaid as of the 15th. The landlord has already issued a formal notice. If Nolan doesn't cure the default within 30 days, the early lease enforcement clause activates. I said nothing. I let the numbers sit where they fell. And Vivian, the co-signers on that lease, are jointly and severally liable. If Nolan defaults, the landlord can pursue your parents for the full remaining balance. I understand. I'm not asking you to do anything about it. I'm just making sure you know. I know. I hung up. I sat at my desk. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt the same thing I feel when a column balances after hours of searching for the discrepancy. Relief. Accuracy. The quiet confirmation that the numbers don't lie, even when people do. A week went by faster than I expected. Then another. Then a month. Nolan didn't cure the default. He couldn't. He had no clients. Not one. 41 of my 53 had actively reported his solicitation. The remaining 12 had simply ignored his email entirely. Miller Wealth Management existed as a name on a lease, a logo on a website that received no traffic, and a $90,000 debt accruing interest at 7.4% against a $310,000 house that my parents had lived in for 31 years. I didn't seek updates. I didn't check public records or drive past his office or ask mutual acquaintances what they'd heard. The information came to me the way it always does in Portland, through professional channels and the quiet, efficient circulation of facts among people who work in the same industry. Sarah Thompson told me first. She came in for her quarterly review in January, sat down across from my desk, and said, "I don't know if you want to hear this, but that office your brother opened on Congress Street is dark. Blinds closed. No signage anymore. Someone from the building management company told my husband they're pursuing the co-signers." I nodded. I moved the conversation to her Schedule C. The forensic audit Arthur had initiated traced the full scope of Nolan's data theft. 12 years of client records, tax identification numbers, service histories, billing records. Under Maine's data privacy statutes, the unauthorized access and export of that information carried potential civil liability well beyond the tortious interference claim. Arthur filed the civil complaint in Cumberland County Superior Court in December. By February, the pieces had fallen into a pattern that was as predictable as a depreciation schedule. Nolan's office lease terminated. The landlord's attorney filed for early enforcement against the co-signers for the remaining lease obligation, including the $15,000 early termination penalty. Combined with the original $90,000 loan and the accrued interest, my parents' total exposure exceeded $108,000 secured against their home. Nolan could not pay. He had no income. He had no clients. He had no professional license. His attorney, David Foster, had withdrawn from representation after Nolan failed to pay his initial retainer beyond the first installment, which I later learned totaled just under $3,000. 3 weeks after the lease terminated, Nolan started working night shifts at a warehouse distribution center off Route 1. $11.60 an hour. I didn't look that up. Sarah Thompson's husband ran a logistics company that used the same distribution hub, and the information reached me on its own, the way small city information always does. Someone saw him loading pallets at 2 a.m, wearing a reflective vest and work boots, and mentioned it at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast I attended. I said nothing. I took a sip of coffee and moved on. My parents' home went into foreclosure in March, $310,000 in assessed value, but the bank forced the sale to satisfy the debt, the penalties, and the legal judgments. They didn't get a listing. They didn't get an offer. They walked away with nothing from a home they'd owned free and clear 12 months earlier. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the west end of the city. 2nd floor, shared laundry in the basement. George, at 65 years old, started driving for a rideshare service 3 days a week to cover the rent. Barbara stopped attending the church she'd gone to for 22 years because, as I learned through Helen Davis, who attended the same parish, she couldn't face the women in her Bible study group who had heard about Nolan's firm and the foreclosure and the whole quiet, meticulous unraveling. The family dinner stopped entirely, not because I refused to attend, because there was no table to gather around anymore. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindication. I felt the way you feel when you close out a fiscal year that had been brutal but honest, finished, balanced, done. 5 months passed, then 6, then 8, then a year. I learned through Arthur that Nolan had filed for personal bankruptcy. His credit score had dropped to 431. The civil complaint was still pending, and Arthur estimated restitution in the range of $72,000 once the court accounted for the data theft, the tortious interference damages, and legal fees. Nolan's bankruptcy would complicate collection, but it wouldn't erase the judgment. Some debts don't disappear just because you can't pay them. They follow you. They show up on background checks and loan applications and employment screenings. They sit in courthouse databases and public records, patient and permanent. I never contacted my parents. They never contacted me. The blocked number stayed blocked. The family group chat continued without me, presumably, though I wouldn't know. I had removed myself from it completely, and I felt no curiosity about what was being said in my absence. 1 year after the Sunday dinner, on a Saturday morning in mid-October, Maya and I were in the backyard. The leaves on the maple tree Marcus had planted the year we bought the house were just starting to turn, gold at the edges, still green at the center. Maya was on her knees in the dirt beside the fence, wearing gardening gloves that were 2 sizes too big for her hands, digging a hole for a rose bush we'd picked out together at the nursery on Commercial Street. She had made honor roll the previous semester. She'd joined the school's science club. She had 2 best friends named Abby and Grace who came over on Saturdays and ate popcorn in the living room and laughed so hard they couldn't breathe. She laughed more now. She laughed the way 10-year-olds are supposed to laugh, without looking over her shoulder first. I knelt beside her and helped her lower the rose bush into the hole. The roots were tangled and dense, and we loosened them together with our fingers, gently, the way the woman at the nursery had shown us. "This is for Daddy's garden," Maya said. She'd been calling it that since spring, when we planted the first row of tomatoes along the back fence, and she placed a small painted rock at the end of the row that read, "Marcus," in her careful handwriting. "It is," I said. She patted the dirt around the base of the bush. She sat back on her heels and looked at it. "Mom?" "Yeah?" "Do you think Daddy would like that we're doing this? Instead of going to Grandma's?" I looked at my daughter. Her braids were coming loose. There was dirt on her chin. Her hands were brown with soil. She was smiling, a real smile, the kind that starts in the eyes. "I think your daddy would love this." She nodded. She wiped her hands on her jeans and stood up and surveyed the garden like a foreman inspecting a job site. Then she looked at me with an expression that was too steady, too sure, for a 10-year-old. "I'm glad we don't have to pretend anymore." I pulled her into a hug. She smelled like dirt and sunscreen and the lavender shampoo she'd started insisting on buying herself. "Me too, baby." We stayed in the yard until the sun dipped behind the maple tree and the air turned cool. No phones, no notifications, no doorbell ringing, no voices through the wood telling me I owed anyone anything. Just the quiet click of garden shears, the smell of turned earth, the sound of my daughter humming a song I didn't recognize, something she'd learned from Abby or Grace, something that belonged entirely to her new life. I never regretted a single second of it. Some doors close so better ones can open. I'm just glad I'm the one with the key. If you enjoyed this story about protecting your children and knowing your worth, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.